Welcome to Beers with Bill. And this evening, it's my pleasure to host Callum Hay, Halo Brewery in the Junction in Toronto. And we're going to start off with the Magic Missile. And Callum, you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So Magic Missile is, I guess you could call it our flagship pale ale. It's a dry hop pale ale. Basically with this, it's been through quite the evolution since my early homebrew days. But as it currently stands, it's meant to be like in the New England style sort of direction. So juicy, hazy. It's hopped ridiculously, mostly with Galaxy, which is an Australian hop. Also my favorite hop. Lots of like tropical passion fruit kind of notes to it. So it's got like, it really pushes the juice factor for a 5.5%. Yeah, we do about, I think it's like 8 pounds per barrel kind of dry hop on it. So it's dry hop basically like an IPA as a pale ale.
Yeah. I like it. It's you're right. Got that tropical front tone. It's hazy. It's juicy. Is this what your the first style that you started out with IPA, or did you?
Actually, like, I mean, early days, it was a lot of Belgian styles. That's actually what got me into making beer, was the lack of availability of Belgian styles. But we evolved towards like the IPAs and the juicier things, just because in terms of sessionability and just drinkability of a beer, I find like the IPAs, the pale ales, the really hop stuff, but not bitter hopped, but juicy hopped. Like I can drink a lot of it and enjoy it. And it's my favorite kind of beer, you know, to sit around and drink. So that's what I ended up focusing on. Yeah.
Yeah. So you started out graduate at University of Waterloo, software engineer.
Yep.
And what's that process go for going from being a software engineer to, I know, doing home brewing, but then making that step right into being an owner and a brewer?
Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, so there was quite a long period before the jump to professional. I guess like it started with actually a friend of mine. And the name Halo actually comes from my last name, Hay, and his last name, Lowy. He's no longer part of the company. We're still great friends, but we got together and did home brewing like a ton. We wanted to make beers that just weren't available in Toronto. And it turned into like an obsession, basically. We ended up, it started like in my condo, and then it went to like a rented space in Kensington, and we stayed there for about a year. Just like constantly every week making a point of like, okay, we're gonna brew something new, we're gonna try this. We had like a cabinet freezer with temperature control. We did this, the whole as fancy as you can get at a homebrew scale, I guess, without spending ridiculous amounts of money. It is an expensive hobby. But after a point, I wanted to go professional with it. I was tired of sort of my desk job, really. And going professional was the biggest and scariest and most difficult leap, right? Basically, finding real estate and raising capital were very difficult things. They were the most difficult things. But after a lot of persistence, we did it, or I did it. And basically, yeah, we found our space in the west end of Toronto. And then from renting that space to opening was about 6 to 8 months. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of specifics in there, a lot of details, but like learning the system and all that stuff took the better part of a year. Like overall, I mean, I was brewing on it before I really truly understood all of what I was doing early on. But I mean, you can still make good beer and not fully comprehend all of the details and quirks of a piece of equipment or all the pieces of equipment. But I mean, I'm still learning things. So you kind of just have to jump in and do it after a certain point, even with education or not, specifically to brewing. So yeah.
That's that synergy of it being a science and an art all at the same time, isn't it?
Sure.
So what was
Yeah.
that anticipation like? I mean, that's actually 8 months from people I've talked to. That was a pretty tight time frame, but what was the anticipation like? You find the space.
Of finding the space?
Yeah, what did that feel like when you first walked into that space?
Oh, um, it was exciting. It was kind of like, also, this is kind of a small space, but it's only 1,200 square feet. I was really hoping for more, but we're also trying to open a brewery in Toronto, and there's not a lot of space available in Toronto. So when, yeah, I was kind of like pacing back and forth in that empty shell of a space, kind of like just trying to figure out the logistics of it, just like, okay, it's got a garage door. Not a lot of places have a giant garage door. That's good. Like it's just like you sort of, you get whittled down over time as you visit place to place, and you're like, well, this isn't going to work, and this isn't going to work, and this place worked, or at least it worked in theory. And so there was a lot of excitement and nervousness in realizing that. And then it became a question of, okay, like, what does the landlord like? What's the landlord like? And like, how do we even negotiate a lease? What the heck is this process like? And so then the details of that start weighing down on you, and you're less excited and more just like trying to figure it all out.
Everybody that I talk to who's an owner and a brewer, there's that process of, you're a business owner, you're an educator, you are working hard, long hours, you're not making a lot of money, but you're passionate about your beers. Where's that passion for you come from?
Oh, the passion is like, it's the rabbit hole, it's the details, it's the iteration, and having sort of a goal in mind, not knowing what the path really looks like to get there, but knowing that you have at least the base skills to start wiggling your way towards it. It's the iteration of brewing and all of the details that go into it that are my passion. Like I love solving problems. I'm still a programmer, and so I still solve those kinds of problems, but brewing has a sort of similar scientific iterative nature, and I really take a lot of pleasure in figuring it out regularly. So coming up with, like, a lot of my inspiration, for example, will come from going to other breweries and trying a beer that just blows me away. And then it's like, how did they do this? What are all the details that went into doing this? And then breaking it apart and then putting my own twists on it based off of my own knowledge, and then diving in and doing the first one, and then being like, okay, like we got this far, like what's it going to take to really push it to the next level? And then iterating and just exploring the space. I take great passion in exploring the space of brewing. Yeah.
Now you're an open source brewing. Like
Yeah.
your recipes are online, what you do. How many of your iterations end up online?
I try to make all of them end up online. There is a logistical issue in that, like, they don't happen every like immediate time that I brew, because there is a bit of data entry. And that's sort of just the nature of it. I don't have that fully automated. I don't know how I would. Um, but I do try to keep it up to date as much as I can and try and keep the most recent revisions up there. I actually catalog them too. So like if you go onto one of the recipe pages, you can actually, there's a drop down and you can like look and see how things have evolved over time. I think it's up. I think there are a few recipes that are in need of a refresher or an update, but yeah, I'll try and keep it up to date.
What's the idea behind having an open source recipe book?
Okay, yeah, the big thing is sort of it's it's a it's paying back the knowledge that I've gained. Like all of mine, I'm not like school taught brewer, right? Like I did not go to Niagara College or any place like that to learn this stuff. I taught myself. But in teaching myself, I learned from other home brewers. I went on forums, I read books, I got all my knowledge from all these other people. And so this is a payback. Like it's giving back to the community. That's how I see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mike asked an interesting question in the chat bar. He's curious as to how your engineering background has worked its way into your brewing. Is it in automation? Is it in process monitoring? Like
Yes.
all
It's
those things.
I mean, so in many ways, like brewing specifically, I have a system of spreadsheets that are custom programmed like down to scripted levels, like in terms of attenuation calculations for like how attenuable a mash is. Like there's a lot of things to consider there. There's like the temperature, the pH, the thickness of the mash, the, you know, all of these different factors come together. And then the labs will give you yeast numbers. They'll give you a low and a high percentage based off of some very isolated scenario that they've come up with for how much yeast will, you know, turn those sugars into alcohol. And it's like none of those numbers in practice ultimately do exactly what you expect them to do. So you end up having to build all these data points across all your brews and figure out all that information. And like that's like bread and butter programming. That's just like regression models and like doing statistics and like writing code to solve these problems is enjoyable and interesting to me. So I build these models to help make the business better by making the beer better. That's one example. So we have like a spreadsheet for every single brew that we've ever done, and they all have these equations built into them. They all do these calculations automatically, do a lot of automation in that regard. In other regards, our website has backend that allows me to put all those revisions into the site so that they can be displayed to our customers, so they can see all that information. I've written all of that code as well. So I'm still employing my software skills to further the brewery in quite a few regards. I built our whole online store. I mean, it has a Shopify backend, but we don't have to pay them tons of money in order to have a really cool online store because I built it all myself. Yeah.
What's our second beer that we're going to try?
Sure. Let's move on to New Wave next.
New Wave. Okay. Very subtle.
It's a little, yeah, it's a little less. I mean, it could be. No, it's not quite as punchy as the Magic Missile was. The hops are a little more. There's a lot more variety in the hops than Magic Missile. Magic Missile is like galaxy, galaxy, galaxy. Whereas New Wave, it has a bit of galaxy in it, but it's like Citra, Amarillo, Centennial. Like it's got a lot of the classic West Coast hops going on in it, but still dry hopped a lot, like a lot.
So Terry and Emma, they're making a comment that your online store is like a 20-fold improvement over a standard Shopify.
Thanks.
So being self-taught and learning, like literally taking other people's recipes apart and building off of that. Is there anybody in the industry that you would say is sort of your inspiration?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, there's I mean, there are a few like US brewers that are inspiring, very inspiring. Um, John Kimmick comes to mind. He's the head brewer of The Alchemist, Heady Topper, like Vermont breweries. Um, him, Sean Hill, also Vermont, Hill Farmstead. Those guys, like, they're of that sort of mindset. I'd say that like starting it from the ground up, like learning from the best. Greg Noonan, who was like, if you've read his book about brewing lager beer, it's like it's a kind of like technical Bible in its own right. Um, these guys, like, they dig the nitty gritty technical elements of brewing, and I admire that. And then have these phenomenal breweries on top of it, which heavily inspired me as well with their great beers. So,
Is there any style of beer you wish you'd brew but you haven't tackled yet?
um, in terms of anything that could be done on our equipment, no. But there are beers that cannot be done on our equipment where the answer is yes. And most specifically, I'd say that the spontaneous fermented beers or cool ship beers, or, I mean, it doesn't have to be a cool ship, but something of that nature where the beer is left to the environment to take in the local microorganisms and then ferment in barrels. Um, that's something that someday I hope to do. I endeavor to do it, but we need the space, we need the equipment, all of those things. And on top of that, probably a good barrel program, a well-established barrel program to begin with would be a good idea before jumping into spontaneous land.
Yeah, there's a lot of things around doing the spontaneous that in a tight little space like you have would probably be a little bit problematic.
Yeah, a little.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a barrel program, I could, up in the rafters, we can hide the barrels.
Actually, we do have a barrel program that's like the barrels have been sitting around for about almost 2 years now, but we keep them off site. So we're slowly taking over the storage facility across the street from us. So one of the lockers there is just rammed with 500-liter puncheons, and they're all filled with like a sort of like a base lambic style golden ale. Okay. And they're starting to taste pretty good. So I'm hoping to release probably the first or one or two like bottles of that this year.
Now that's got to be interesting, having it like close by but still off-site. You're doing, I'm assuming, ambient temperature aging.
Yeah, yeah, we don't have much of a choice there, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Though with the larger vessels, like I find that like I don't think keeping it necessarily at 16 to 18 degrees Celsius is like going to have that much of an impact relative to a slightly fluctuating indoor ambient temperature. Um, but who knows? Yeah, I don't know too many people who have perfect temperature control over their barrels to ask about it.
There aren't too many. That's absolutely certain on that one.
Yeah.
So you've got lots of company in that program. So
Yeah.
Troy was curious, are you using Ontario produce in your
Um, a lot of our produce actually comes from BC. Um, we get a lot of our fruit through the use of purees and concentrates through Pacific Coast fruit in BC. Just because we like a diversity of fruits that you just don't find in Ontario. Most of Ontario's fruit tends to be of the sort of orchard variety. Though there are peaches, and I am looking to get a whole ton of Ontario peaches this upcoming peach season in late July, early August. But yeah, I look for fruit everywhere. Like I just try to find it where I can find it, especially since like I'm looking for like things like black currant or like elderberry or passion fruit or something like that. You just don't really find it too much in Ontario.
That's true. You would be hard pressed to find those in Ontario. I was going to ask this a little bit later, but somebody popped it up. They really like your branding. So is your design work an in-house design work, or do you?
No, so we have designers at Underline, and they're a design firm that's actually right above Halo. They are in the space right above us, so we can just like walk upstairs and say hi to them, if it wasn't a pandemic. But yeah, it's pretty convenient. And yeah, we've had that relationship for, gosh, like 4 years now, 3 years, three or four. So we rebranded pretty early on in the brewery's life. We had sort of a, early home brew built brand, and then we wanted to up it with a more professional look, a little more modern, clean, geometric.
That answers the second part of the question. They were curious as to why the switch over to geometric branding.
I I love geometric, like clean, modern geometric things. I'm a bit of a minimalist personally. It's somewhat reflective of who I am, my personality, my tastes. Yeah, I like to have sort of the final word on a lot of the look and feel of the Halo branding. And my wife Sarah she's a designer and experiential like creative, and so we both share very similar tastes when it comes to that sort of stuff, and we kind of just go that direction.
No, I was going to ask that question.
Bill, can I interject for a sec?
No.
Okay.
You know what the rules are. Get off right now.
All right, muting.
Go ahead, Derek.
I was just gonna say, I asked the question because Naomi and I really liked your original branding with the icons. Like it was, really, I mean, we like the new designs even better. Like they're clean, they're crisp, they're awesome. But I thought the original icons were really unique to you guys. And so I was kind of wondering, like, was it hard to give that up? And did you lose much recognition or anything?
It was incredibly hard. Yeah. That was a very, very hard time for me. I made that decision. The decision was made with a heavy heart. it's really hard giving up that stuff because my wife Sarah built that brand basically, and it was really hard for her to give that up. But it was sort of, we were running into a kind of like we were painting ourselves into a corner with it, and that was that all of our labels looked very similar. It was very hard to break out of those circles, the sort of emblems and badges that were created by that design. And so it just like, we needed to figure out a way out of it, and we sort of just something new, just went with something new. Yeah.
Was it hard for you and Sarah to move to another design, like to a design firm? Because I was going to ask that question because when I was on LinkedIn looking at your profile, I found Sarah's and I was like, that makes sense there.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was just, she has a full-time job. She does not do like, she does all the social media for Halo on top of her full-time job. And like that, there's not a lot of time for her to also be the full creative of the company as well. So you just need another party. You need a third party to do this stuff. It's too time consuming, and also like the ideas within the company itself could stagnate, right? Like you need a sort of third eye to give some perspective. It's hard, but like, yeah, I think it's resulted in a unique and interesting brand, and it really meets all of our expectations. So yeah.
So what beer are we going to move to next?
I think since the next two, there's a dark, the Event Horizon and the Chroma Key. I think the Chroma Key is the better choice of the two for the next one, so we don't completely annihilate our palates on a dark beer with sarsaparilla in it before the subtleties of a funkier beer. So the Chroma Key.
I love that subtle funk tone.
Yeah, it's of all the fruits with our Brett, I find the key lime actually is one of the better ones. Like it complements it a lot. The Brett has kind of a cherry quality to it. Like you get that leather cherry barnyardy funk. Sort of is it Brettanomyces lambicus? But the cherry plus lime, it's a pretty winning combo of flavors.
It is. It certainly is. So you do a number of different beers in this style.
Yes. Yeah.
Was this what made you start home brewing to begin with?
No. No, I mean, really what got me started was like, I wanted to make delirium. I wanted to make a Belgian strong golden ale. That was the style I loved the most. I loved going to Ronnie's and drinking delirium. But and I also loved like the triples, the doubles, the quads, and like my tastes have changed dramatically since those times. Like I just can't drink those beers in volume, right? Like I can't sit down and, I mean, I could try and I'd be destroyed by it. Yeah, I don't have the stamina to drink those beers that I once did. But like, yeah, my tastes have evolved a lot over time. I didn't even, like when I first started brewing, I didn't even know what Brettanomyces was, what Pediococcus was, right? Like, I had to learn all those things, and they didn't come till much later. I was learning the basics for the first like year and a half, 2 years. Like I was just learning how to make like, well, Belgian beers, but also like some standard beers too, right? A lot of the funkier things came much later, like 4 or 5 years in, at least.
You're doing a wonderful job with them, that's for sure.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So with this beer, it's kettle soured. It's not aged in barrels. It's aged in stainless and in bottle. But so it's kettle soured first. It's 100% Brettanomyces fermentation, and we have our own strains of Brettanomyces that we use, and they've been isolated from my homebrew days. So I would get bottle dregs, I would collect the bottle dregs, I would grow them up in, flasks. I would then pitch them into carboys, and I would grow them up further. And then I chose the carboys that I liked the most, and then I sent samples of those off to escarpment labs in Guelph, and they isolated the samples. And then they sort of gave me a layout of the land of what was there, and they gave me like 3 samples in the mail, and each one had its own sort of characteristics and things, and then chose what I liked, and that became our pitch, and that's what's in this. And it's also constantly evolving over time as I make tweaks to it and decisions about it. And then we add key lime puree and concentrate in the fermenter, and then we let it age for like months and months and months before we release it. Yeah.
So you're pitching this all your own now, or do you still let Escarpment Labs?
We'll re-up our pitch once a year for
Once
the
a year.
Brettanomyces. Yeah, but generally we'll reharvest it between brews depending on how happy I was with how it went.
So Naomi asked a question. How do you sample the bacteria? Do you like brew with it first, or?
Oh, I mean, usually in those scenarios, they would be carboys. So it would be like, if it's from the brewery, basically what I'll do is I'll run off some of a batch of like a fairly reasonable ABV eventual beer. So like something not too insane. Like I'm not going to take an Imperial Stout and use it. I would use like maybe the base of Magic Missile or the base of like New Wave, probably not much higher alcohol than that. Run it into a carboy, and then once I've grown this bacteria or bacteria, who knows what else, like wild yeast, in a flask, I'll pitch it into that carboy, let it sit for at least 6 to 8 months before even tasting it. And then that sort of becomes the process, sort of come back to it, see what it tastes like. I've not had to do this a whole lot except for with our barrels at this point. I'm pretty happy with the way we've isolated these things, and a lot of that stuff came from the homebrew days where I already had these things lined up. I already had waited long periods of time because I had been starting a business with all this stuff sitting in storage, and so that it's not like I'm constantly waiting whatever 8 months to years to figure out what the next bacteria or whatever is. In this case, it would just go into a barrel now, right?
Mike's curious, do you have completely separate gear for the lactose sour beers, or are you?
No.
Yeah.
No, I'm not worried about
You're burning it after each batch.
Yeah. Yeah, the lactose Lacto is pathetically weak. It is nothing. It gets taken over by Saccharomyces with ease. It's hard enough to keep lacto from being contaminated. What you have to worry about more is something like diastaticus or something that could like produce amylase enzyme, and that would result in like bottles exploding or something like that. And it has really small morphology, so it gets into all the little nicks and dings and anything. We're very careful about cleaning. We'll do caustic cycle, hot water, cold water, parasitic every single time. We're not just like using hot water to do things. It's the full chemical burn plus temperature and pH all the time, changing, constantly fluctuating, killing everything. My concern maybe in the upcoming future is once we get our barrel stuff going, making sure that that stuff stays separate is a concern of mine. I think that all of the gaskets that touch anything that comes out of the barrel will be kept separate. Anything soft that is not stainless will be kept separate. Yeah.
That would be a wise decision.
Yeah. Yeah, Pediococcus worries me. Lactobacillus does not.
So I'm curious in all of this, right off the mark, what's your favorite style of music?
Music, new wave, actually. Who would have guessed it? Yeah, no, I love like retro 80s, synth wave, dark wave, synth pop. I'm a big fan of those styles. Like Depeche Mode, New Order. I really like those bands. But then again, I have like a soft spot for the Tragically Hip and like other bands that are completely not those bands. So yeah, it varies. I like a lot of indie music that's pretty modern as well. I just have like my favorite stuff is like 80s or 80s like music.
You're getting a thumbs up from Sarah, by the way. Who's on the show. Yeah. Sure. How do you decide what to brew next?
Oh, I mean, the boring answer to that is just like we have a set of beers that are expected now, and we have to brew those beers. So there's that. If you want the more exciting answer, the inspiration for something new will come. I had mentioned this before, but it'll come from going to other breweries, tasting other breweries' beer, and being inspired by that, like because it tastes amazing or it's doing something that I hadn't thought of. And then I need to somehow get that captured and figured out and then incorporated into our beer. Unfortunately, most of the time it's the schedule that dictates, and the schedule is the flagships. It's the expected beers that we produce. We need Magic Missile. We need New Wave. These beers have to be brewed. I'm the one who brews them, gets decided. But in the sun, actually, seasons are a very big factor. I hadn't thought of that, but now that I'm thinking of it, seasons are huge. In the summertime, there's not a lot of intrigue to the decisions that are made in terms of what to brew. We have to brew the Magic Missiles, the Shapeshifters, the New Waves, and we have to brew them voluminously. In the fall and in the winter, things slow down a ton. Then we get a little more wiggle room for interesting, funky, wackier stuff. Then we can start filling some barrels, because usually barrels become available in the wintertime. A lot of things become available in the wintertime or in the fall. It's usually why you see a lot of barrel-aged beers being released in the fall. It's because people are refilling their barrels and emptying out the previous. Also, a lot of fruits are available then. So yeah, there are a lot of things that dictate it, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So someone's curious as if you you do wet hop beers in the fall when hops are fresh?
No,
Yeah.
no, I'm completely against wet hop beers.
It's a great
I'll
answer.
tell you all the reasons why, if you want.
By all means, enlighten me.
Okay. So wet hop beers, for one, are filled with oxygen because water is filled with oxygen and the water is not boiled. So it's certainly filled with oxygen. You're then throwing that into basically already fermented beer or fermenting beer past the point when you should be introducing oxygen to it. And you're staling the beer intentionally by throwing wet hops at it. The other thing is logistically, throwing a whole ton of leaves into your fermenter is not great. I have enough trouble throwing like chili peppers and stuff into fermenters and dealing with the aftermath of that. I don't think I'd really want to deal with the aftermath of a whole ton of hop cones flying around in there, or in the kettle for that matter. The last one would be that there's a reason hop pellets exist. It's because they genuinely are amazing engineering solutions to utilizing hops in terms of just the amount of oil that you get per gram versus like a leaf or a cone. I would say the entire thing is a novelty. It's just a big novelty that, like, and I'm sure some people massively disagree with me on this, or they're upset by it. But like, I'm telling you, it's a novelty. Like, it sounds great. Like, oh, the hop producers, they're bringing in all these hops, and they're these wet hops, and it sounds very fresh and lovely. But it's like, none of it's sensible given modern technology and all of the ingredients we have at our disposal. Yeah.
Very apt scientific explanation. I agree with you. It's a novelty. Not many people do them, but if you were going to do it, I would expect you to buy it from one hop producer, and it's from row number 17.
What?
Oh, Sada City did it once. They said who the hop producer was, and we went and harvested row number 17.
Okay.
So novelty. There was nothing unique about row number 17 except
no.
You have to love it. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the last beer.
Yeah, sure. Event Horizon. My glass is still full. I can't pour it yet.
Sarsaparilla.
Yeah, that beer goes really well with vanilla ice cream as well.
I can fully appreciate that.
So yeah, we make Event Horizon and we have Stellar Void. The major difference between the two, Stellar Void's like an amped up Event Horizon with vanilla lactose added. So it's just like a sweeter, bigger vanilla version. But yeah, this beer started out very early homebrew days as just like a straight up for an extra stout, not with sarsaparilla in it. The sarsaparilla sort of made its way in there much later on, after I realized how amazing a combo it was with the sweetness of a pour an extra stout. Yeah, the original goal was not very subtle in the early days. It was just to make the darkest stout possible. It was just to make like a really crazy, deep, dark stout. Yeah, it's pretty high SRM, but that's no longer the goal. This is sort of like in the same tradition as like Dragon Stout, or like some of the other foreign extra stouts that like there's Guinness foreign extra stout, but like I wanted the sweetness and the fullness. I did not want the dryness or the flabbiness of like a lower ABV stout. That's the big thing I wanted out of this. And then I love root beer as well. So sarsaparilla made its way in.
There could be worse reasons for doing what you've done. This is a great dark color. The balance is fantastic on this one.
Thanks.
So with everything that's gone on with COVID and all the changes, we're locked down, we're not locked down, we're locked down again. How do you stay grounded?
Just keeping focused on what's happening within the brewery and not letting myself be too distracted by what's happening outside it. I mean, I was telling you before the show that like my life these days is pretty straightforward. It involves me being at home and being at the brewery, and that's about it. I'm a pretty focused person to begin with, so I don't have a lot of trouble with like the distraction of COVID. It is upsetting, don't get me wrong, but I stay pretty focused on my work, just out of my interest in it. That being said, there are things that happen with the business in the early days of COVID that were difficult to deal with, and there were a lot of changes that happened all at once. And so, I mean, interestingly enough, when that happens, you just get really focused, because you know then if you don't move, things are going to get really bad for you. So you don't have a choice in that focus, right? Yeah, that I don't have anything other than that to say about it.
What do you think the craft beer industry's done right through all of this?
I think, I think the big thing is a lot more online availability, a lot more just availability in unusual channels. So branching out and finding new ways to sell beer. And I think a lot of that is just capitalism, because you have to. But like, you know, it's been a huge boon for customers. By the end of this, like coming out the other side of COVID, people are going to have a lot more options than they did before COVID, because all those old things that have been gone are going to come back. And then on top of it, you've now got all this new online stuff. You've got Uber Eats has it. They didn't have it before. There are all these new ways to get alcohol online. And then on top of it, you've got all these licensees, bars selling retail on top of that. So that's, yeah.
We're going to have an interesting off-the-record conversation. Remy just posted a bunch of stuff about how he really loves wet hot beer and the reasons why. So we'll talk about, I don't want to talk about that right now. Terry and Emma point out, they want to know if you've ever had your Event Horizon beer at the Perimeter Institute. And if you haven't, they know somebody that they can introduce you to.
We have, actually. When I saw that for the first time, I was just like, this is my dream. Like, I'm fulfilled. This is amazing.
Oh, I can totally understand that. They asked an interesting question. What is sarsaparilla and where does it come from?
It's a bark slash root, like it's basically the exterior of a plant. It's dried and it's torn off. It's like it's these little, I mean, it looks like fragments of bark, to be honest. It's like I believe it grows throughout North America. Honestly, I don't have like the full knowledge of exactly where you could find sarsaparilla specifically, but I do know it's native to North America and other parts of the world. This specifically was Indian sarsaparilla. There are different variants of it, which I find has much more of a smooth vanilla, bit of like cherry wood, little touch of wintergreen sort of element to it. Whereas other sarsaparilla is more in, I guess, like it's a little more earthy. It's not as fragrant, floral, rounded. Yeah, that's most of what I know about sarsaparilla.
Good.
That, and it's pretty old timey. It's been around for a very long time, and was originally responsible for the flavor of root beer along with sassafras. But sassafras was banned by the FDA back in the 50s for weird reasons. Anyway.
It does go
They
back.
overfed mice with it.
It does go back a long ways. Its roots are back in the 1880s, 1890 timeframe.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things. First, Ed J joined us a little bit later, so he was curious where the brewery name come from. We talked about this earlier, but if you could just refresh that.
Sure, yeah. It comes from my last name, Hay, and it comes from a friend of mine's last name, Lowy. So Hey Low. And my friend Andre Lowy, he's no longer with the company. He's still a great friend of mine. He just didn't want to go full pro with it. But I kept the name because it's genuine to sort of the heart of where we came from. Yeah.
Siraj wants to know if you could take a single calculated risk this year, what would it be?
Jeez. A single calculated risk. Man, I feel like I'm taking lots of calculated risks all the time, but like, it really depends. It depends on, the biggest risk I want to take is getting another space, and it's getting a barrel room. Whether I have the stamina to take that risk is a different question. It's definitely been on my mind for a long time. One risk associated with it that I certainly am taking is I'm buying up lots more barrels, and I'm adding to our barrel program. That's a risk I'm certainly not afraid to take. And it does cost a lot of money, but I'm very happy to take it. But getting a new space and actually creating a barrel room out of it, that's something that's been on my mind for a long time. And I think with COVID, I actually have an opportunity, which is the scary part, because there are a lot of spaces available in Toronto now, for lease and for sale, that weren't before the pandemic hit. So yeah, that's on my mind. I don't know if I'll take it though.
Making a move is a really big risk for any established business.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. If you could go back in time, Callum, what would be the one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
Whew. I don't know. This gets, there's some. So I have generalized anxiety. I would go back and I would tell myself to deal with it professionally. I think it's personal, but like it's probably the truest answer I could give. Um, Starting a business and operating a business has forced me to confront my anxiety and making a lot of decisions and figuring that stuff out. I would definitely go back in time and tell myself, dude, like, one, the software job, it's not doing it for you. Like, you really need to focus on this. And I did. It just took longer than I think it should have. And also, like, deal with your anxiety.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
For, that insightful personal thing, because that is a big issue for some people.
Yeah. I think it's,
and it is not an easy thing to overcome.
no.
If there was one thing that all of us have tuned in tonight that we could take away from your chat, what would that thing be?
Geez, I mean, cliche as it sounds, follow your passion. If you're doing something that's not like you're 100% in and you're like not feeling it, if you dread going to work, if you're not really into what you're doing, stop doing it and do something you love. Not everybody is an entrepreneur, and I get that. But like, I certainly have days where I don't like going into work. I think that's going to happen no matter what. But if you if you can make it so that 80 to 90% of your days are like you're happy about it and like you're enjoying what you're doing and you're looking forward to the next thing, then you're winning, I think. I certainly was not like that before I got into brewing, and now I am. And I enjoy being my own boss and all those things. I think that, yeah, doing what you love, following your passion, and then, telling other people about it, all those things, they're important.
Callum, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us this evening and introducing us and discussing your beers with us. We truly appreciate the time that you have taken to be with us tonight.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate being here. Thanks.